With the somewhat recent split of Metal Gear and Silent Hill creator Hideo Kojima and Konami, combined with the latter's more recent announcement to halt the creation of AAA game titles outside of their Pro Evolution Soccer series, I feel like the company is for all intents and purposes done as a mainstay in the gaming world. So rather than rant about the plethora of recent terrible decisions, I'd rather reminisce about the amazing legacy they're abandoning. So here's my top 10 Konami games. As usual, one per series, and no, Silent Hill will not be on this list. I greatly respect and admire them as games, and even some of them as works of art, especially 2 and 3. But I'm just not a big fan of horror games, so I don't personally love playing them like many people do. Number 10. Vandal Hearts 2. Vandal Hearts is a fairly underappreciated tactical RPG series. It's not on the level of Final Fantasy Tactics, Disgaea, or Fire Emblem, but it's not too far off. The combat is fast-paced for its genre, including a surprisingly wide variety of tactics and specials. Story isn't the best, but it's very twist-heavy and it sets up the villains very well. If you want a new tactical RPG series outside of the mainstays, Vandal Hearts is a solid alternative, and all 3 are good games, with 2 of course being my favorite. Number 9. Frogger. Frogger is Konami's first big success, and is still one of the most recognized games there is. It's brutally simple by today's standards, but it still provides a surprisingly engaging balance of challenge and fun that many games nowadays fail miserably to accomplish. The reason it's so on this list is, for me personally, it's kind of a one-trick pony, and when a company has released so many great games since, I can't help but get bored quickly and move on to something more fulfilling. Number 8. X-Men. The 1992 X-Men arcade game is a classic of its time, among the best side-scrolling beat-em-ups in an era where they were all the rage. You can choose between Wolverine, Cyclops, Dazzler, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Colossus as you fight through weird mini-sentinels, turrets, dudes on weird motorcycle things, plant monsters, and the like until you reach the boss of each level. Classic X-Men villains like Juggernaut, Wendigo, the Blob, Emma Frost, and Magneto himself. The game is also infamous for amazingly terrible voice acting and dialogue, which of course I love, on top of my love for X-Men in general, and my fond memories of playing this at the arcade as a kid. The thing keeping it from getting any higher is, if you have the spare change, or an emulator, to keep playing, it's fairly short, but still a great burst of fun, especially with friends, and I prefer it to some of their other genre classics like Turtles in Time and The Simpsons. Number 7. Sparkster. Rocket Knight Adventures 2. Starting off the truly great games on this list is a far more underrated series than Vandal Hearts was. The Rocket Knight Adventure games, aka the Sparkster games, before becoming multi-platform, were the truly great platformers on the Genesis in my opinion. The titular Sparkster controls more smoothly than Sonic, while having a wide variety of attacks and ways of maneuvering around beautifully designed levels. The enemy variety is somewhat lacking, but the boss fights more than make up for it, and the soundtrack is among the better conglomerates of music from the 16-bit era. I personally can't see why Sonic has so much more appeal, and most people weren't even made aware of Sparkster. Number 6. Castlevania, Rondo of Blood. Castlevania is among my favorite series, which I guess goes to show how great the top 5 are. There are a few Castlevania titles that could have taken this spot and I'd feel good about it, because 3D entries aside, Castlevania is nothing if not consistent. Even the black sheep of the series, Castlevania 2, is hated more for being weird than being bad. That being said, even more so than Castlevania 3, Super Castlevania 4, Dawn of Sorrow, or even Symphony of the Night, I think Rondo of Blood is the best Castlevania game to date. It's the hidden treasure of the series. Originally released on the commercial failure that was the TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine in Japan, before receiving a watered-down SNES port, and therefore went under the radar for years until a remake was released with the original as an unlockable in 2007 on the PSP, and it was finally added to the Nintendo eShop last year. The music is spectacular, it's possibly the best looking game of its time, the bosses are pure badasses, the environments are gorgeous, and the gameplay is great. It's really a flawless game, but as much as I love the Castlevania series, no game in the series has ever felt like an all-time favorite, because when you get down to it, they're great, but very simple at the same time. Number 5. Contra 3: The Alien Wars. Contra is among the most classic of game series, starring in the heyday of the Nintendo Entertainment System. The original games are good and all, but I think Contra 3 is by far the most enjoyable of the series. The pacing is perfect, it still looks amazing. The soundtrack is among the best on the Super Nintendo. It's batshit crazy action, has great enemy variety and amazing bosses. It controls perfectly, and it's among the few brutally difficult games that makes you want to get good enough to beat it, instead of just making you hate it. Maybe I just suck at games, I don't know, whatever. Number 4 is a tie between Gradius 4 and Sexy Parodius. In my opinion, Gradius, alongside R-Type, are the two kings of the shoot-'em-up or shmup genre. Speaking solely on Gradius, every entry is greater and grander than the last. Even Gradius 5 is technically superior to 4 and a great time on its own. However, I enjoy the levels, enemies, bosses, and the like of Gradius 4 the most. It graphically pushes the Super Nintendo to its limits, has stellar music, near perfect gameplay, and brutal but not cheap difficulty. Parodius is a series of games that is literally a combination of the words parody and Gradius. As the name suggests, it's a more lighthearted, wacky, and for lack of a better term, Japanese take on the main series of Gradius. It's basically the developer's chance to make a similar kind of game while being as off the walls and batshit crazy as possible. As you'd imagine, Sexy Parodius is the most ridiculous of the bunch, and on top of that, it is among the latest in the series, meaning it has among the tightest controls, widest selection of ships, most of which are just random things that can fly for some reason, and that overall provides the most variety and content in the entire series. Being that one is a spin-off of the other, I figured it'd be cool to have them both on this list, as my current mood basically determines which one I want to play more. Number 3. Zone of the Enders, the second runner. Kojima's Zone of the Enders series is possibly two of the best mech games ever. They're high on action, control smoothly, still play like no other mech game, and the story is like playing through a Neon Genesis Evangelion anime. Both games have great stories and gameplay, but the second game plays about as perfectly as a game can, and the story and action get going immediately. This on top of the great music in both games, and the improved environments of the second game, make it among my top choices for just picking up and having a blast, as it provides enough strategy to keep my attention longer than something like Dynasty Warriors. Number 2. Suikoden 2. Suikoden is a well-renowned RPG series. It's not well known, but fairly beloved among those aware of it. I finally got a chance to play the second and most acclaimed game in the series earlier this year, and if anything, the game had been undersold to me at that point. The story is amazing, the game still looks great nearly 20 years later, the combat system remains unique and fun, there's more choice than most of its contemporaries and therefore more replay value. The music is absolutely majestic and the game itself is massive. Suikoden 2 is among the best RPGs I've ever played, and that's my favorite genre, so I've played more than most people know exists. It very well could be number 1 if I didn't have the nostalgia for the game and adoration for the series that my number 1 pick represents. Suikoden 2 is a classic among classics, and I can't wait to delve deeper into the series now. Number 1. Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. When I decided to make this list, I knew what series would be at number 1. Every single game in the series went through my mind as a possible number 1, at least of the main series, like not counting PSP games and stuff, because I haven't played them, even though I heard Peace Walker is amazing. Anyway, I feel like most people expected the Metal Gear Solid game to be on this list. What they likely don't expect is for it to be the second entry. I think it's well recognized as a good game, but things like Raiden's naked cartwheels leave it as the butt of many jokes, and people hate the fact that you can't play a Solid Snake through most of it. I love every game in this series, Phantom Pain included, but barely beating out MGS4, Sons of Liberty remains my favorite. I honestly enjoy controlling Raiden more than I ever liked playing as Snake in the first 3 games. The plot is massive and awesome. The boss battles are among the best in gaming, which is a staple of the series. Fat Man, Vamp, and the like steal the show for me. It introduces some of my favorite characters like Vamp, Olga, and Emma Emmerich, as well as the best cutscenes in the series and the perfect balance of stealth and action. Sons of Liberty is a near-flawless Metal Gear game in my opinion, and is among my favorite among one of the most consistently amazing series in all of gaming. Well, I hope you enjoyed the list, and I am aware that I left off many great games, some because they were in series that I thought had better games, some because I haven't played them, and some just because they're not quite as good as the top 10, but still good. So, if there's an amazing Konami game that you love that is on this list, I probably haven't played it or don't like it as much as you do. Anyway, feel free to comment or whatever if you want about like your favorite games or how stupid my list is or whatever. Anyway, have a good one and stuff. Bye.